Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, our Premier Solutions Engineer, along with Sarah Mitchell, who is in charge of our documentation department. Today, Dion will be continuing his discussion of the tabbed UI replacement using a UX, which has been a very popular topic so far. But he's also here to answer your questions. So if you do have questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Let me make you the presenter.
Dynamite.
And there's your screen. Excellent.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We always enjoy having you and with us. And wanted to say thank you to the individuals who've been, sending in questions. We're getting a little stacked up. I apologize. We've got some good questions that came in. We'll have to handle them ASAP. But we're kind of a little queued on that. So keep them coming though. We'll get them lined up, taken care of, and sent out. And as Dave mentioned, that's why we're here. If you go to the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar control panel, you can put in questions about our presentation today, but other questions that you might have, and we will do our best to answer those questions as much as possible. And if not, we'll record it and go figure it out. So a lot of really cool stuff coming down the pike for development. You'll see some new releases soon, and the team is very, very busy on that. In fact, there was a new production release a week or two ago, and other ones are being prepared, so some neat stuff. Today, what I want to do is continue the discussion, and this really came from our loyal developers, specifically around the tabbed UI. And a kind of, one thing we're trying to do is get to parity with the original tabbed UI components. So the original tabbed UI had a lot of functionality and capability built into it, which was nice because it made putting together systems very quick. It had a lot of core capabilities. And what we're doing is we're going through a process of using panel cards, panel layout, panel navigators, et cetera, newer technologies to replicate that functionality. And for a really good reason. I want to kind of go through my slides again. The tabbed UI had a lot of really nice things, a built-in menu system, multi-pane tab interface, integrated security. We've kind of covered those elements so far in our series on tabbed UI, specifically how to replicate that capability there. The problem with the tabbed UI is that it is not responsive. It's slightly responsive, but it's not really built to be used on, say, a tablet or even a phone interface. It's a bit of a heavy component and it has very limited styling flexibility. And I think if you've watched the series here, we've gone a long way towards addressing these three issues by going to a panel card technology. It is responsive in nature. You can also use panel layout responsiveness, meaning you can detect the platform you're on and on the fly change things, which is pretty nice. It's much lighter, so it loads faster, it renders quickly, and you don't have to have a lot of extra stuff that you don't need in there in the application to begin with. And styling, the sky's the limit. It uses the newer alpha styles. You can use the web style builder to change it. One of the key questions we keep getting is how to change the tab metaphor in the panel navigator when you're in tab man mode. So we're looking into that. I don't have an answer on that yet, but we're looking at how can you easily change that tab so it looks a little differently. It kind of comes with a standard built-in look and feel you'll see today, and a lot of people would like to modify that to conform with their existing branding or a certain style or methodology of how they're presenting the information to the user. So today what I want to do is cover a very interesting question. So I'm going to kind of cover what we've done so far, but more importantly, we had an interesting question that I will go over in this. So let me jump into my development environment. Folks that are new, this is our development environment. Let me get something set up real quick. Okay, there we go. Just there, bear with me. And I didn't turn off my notifications. I don't want us to get disturbed while we're doing here.
More disturbed than you already are.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm going to do is show, and again, if anybody's interested, we'll be glad to give you copies of all this. Remember, we build our samples off the AA demo Northwind. which is a built-in connection string. So you just have to set that up, but pretty simple to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at our previous demonstration. So in our previous demonstration, we had a panel navigator, we had an initial panel card, and in that panel card, we had a list of customers. And our goal was to essentially spawn UXs to edit that customer information. So let's see if I haven't broken this. I think I brought everything in, we'll see. So you'll see after it renders, basically we have our list control. I can now click this little button right here, and you'll notice when I do that, it creates a new tab for me, and it gives that tab a name, and it loads up that record. Then I can go back here and click there, and oh, this is the older one. It's not actually doing the dynamic, but let's see, let me go from here. Let's do this one. I think that's from a ViewBox UX. Let's just show that one, just to show the concept here. Didn't bring all over. I'll double check that. Okay. So we'll see, we're clicking on a row, it brings up there. I click on another row, and it brings up a new tab. And now I have my different items open based upon which one I clicked on. And we're using newer features that were built into the release a little while ago. It's now part of the production release that allows you to dynamically do two things. One is create what's called an alias, which allows the system to create a unique UX experience, meaning it brings us up in its own little shell kind of scenario. And then the others, we used another capability so we could dynamically set the text of the header. And it was those two aspects linked to an original list or UX that allows us to replicate that functionality. Now, here was the number one question that came in. Other than that, how do I change the style of the tab panes? You'll notice that in my situation with both of these, that I've embedded the list of customers or the ViewBox list in this component here, which is fine. You know, a lot of times that's all you need. It's kind of a directed interface, you're good to go. But I had a number of different people call and ask, and they go, well, you know, my issue is I don't necessarily have this pre-set up. I basically want to do the following, is I want to be able to load a list or ViewBox into a dynamic panel card and then subsequently spawn the edit controls for the records that I'm editing, which is basically how the current tabbed UI works. You can put a grid in there, you can launch that grid, it'll open up in a tab pane. Once it's launched, you can then click on a row and then it opens up a new tab. And so this methodology required this to be at the top level because of a very important reason. So let me go ahead and review what goes on. Is when I click on a row here, on the on-click event, we're basically running a piece of action JavaScript, which will then load that UX to edit the record that I was on in that control. So let's go ahead and go look at that and look at that action JavaScript. So we're going to go in here and you're going to see that we're using the open a UX component. And in here, we're basically doing two things. One is we're creating a UX alias on the fly using JavaScript. That was one of the key things we needed to do. That way, every time you click on a new row, it creates a new panel card, essentially, or new tab pane for us. The others, we're using another capability to do a panel name that then allows you to change the panel name when that's launched. And there's, you can go back and watch the video, walk through it step by step, how to build those items, how they work, etc. But the very important thing about this is that this assumes that this action JavaScript is at the same level as the panel navigator. So you'll notice when I'm opening that UX, I'm pointing it to a panel navigator. And actually what it's doing here is it's technically looking at the UX I'm in to say, hey, what panel navigators are available? So that works fine if, and very important, if your control and your UX are at the same level, essentially all in one. But if you are spawning a other UX that's going to have a list control in it or a ViewBox control, well, that's not at the same level. So if you build the action JavaScript in that UX, it doesn't know about it because we have essentially a parent-child relationship that occurs is that and now let me go ahead and open up my other one now, and I'll go into my main UX. So I've created this little main UX here. And you'll see it's very similar to our tabbed UI. Basically, we have a header area with a control bar, a menu on the left-hand side, then I have a panel navigator, but what's very important is in this panel navigator, I don't have my list control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open my list control as UX in this panel navigator and then subsequently launch the UXs. So essentially, this is the parent control. I'm going to load a child control, which is the list, and then from there. Now, let's go ahead and open up my little child. So I created this child control called customer list, and in here, I have my list. It's very simple. It just has a panel card with a list of customers. If I run it, then you'll see that in here is my items here. So I've essentially recreated this item, but very important, if I go to the JavaScript actions, it has a load customer UX, but oops, no, that's not the one I want. We're not using that in this situation. So I'll show you how that works, but let me go ahead and demonstrate what's going on here. And I know this one's a little bit more complicated, a few more moving items, but I'll let you know exactly how it goes. So here's my menu here. When I click on here, it's going to load into a dynamic tab, my customer list. And then over here, this is normally hidden. I have some hidden fields. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here. That's going to go ahead and open up a new tab that has my customer list. So now it's dynamically open. Now when I click here, what we're going to do is we want to open up in this panel card there. But notice this is a embedded component. So when I click on there, in a second, you'll see that, aha, so I get that same behavior. I now have a panel card that's been added to the top level. So it's very much like the current tabbed UI where we have those elements in here. Now the trick is this. The actual behavior that opens up these items exists at this control, not in the embedded control. And what I do is that when I click this button, I basically send a message to the top level control to say, hey, here's the information, go ahead and open this UX here. So let's walk through how that works. So I'm going to start at the top level. So you'll notice that I created these two little items here called customer ID and panel tile. This is what I'm going to use to create the alias and the panel title at this level here. So you'll notice my list doesn't actually exist here. It's in that subcomponent. Now, I have created a JavaScript action called customer edit UX load. And it's the same thing we had before, where we have a JavaScript alias and we have, I call it PL content, the panel title here. So I'm essentially reusing that concept here. The issue is how I'm going to actually get this information, how the argument is bound. So you'll notice that instead of having a list here, and in my open the UX component, normally I would bind that argument to say, this is the particular record I want to edit. Normally you would do that to the list here, but you'll notice we don't have a list. So what I'm doing is I'm actually tying it to this customer ID. So the idea behind this is that when I click on my list down below, I wanted to set the customer ID and the panel title and then trigger that JavaScript action. So essentially I'm faking it out. I'm basically handing all the information from my embedded list up to the parent, and then the parent is doing the job at that point in time. Again, one of the nice things about the tabbed UI control is it did all that for you. You kind of have to do a few things here. So how do I do that? Well, first and foremost, I'm using a very cool kind of behavior that's built into Alpha, which is if you have a JavaScript command or a JavaScript function on say a UX component, and that UX component is embedded or is opened within another UX component, if I trigger that JavaScript, it will look at the UX it's in, and if that command doesn't exist, it will then pass it up to its parent and run it on its parent. So basically what I've done is on this parent, I created a JavaScript function called load customer. And what that does is that we pass into that load customer, the customer ID and the panel title. And then what we do is we set those two hidden fields, and then we run the action to load the UX. So what's going to happen is my embedded list, my embedded UX with a list is going to call this function with this information that's not going to get served at that sort of embedded component level. It's going to get passed up here. And then this says, oh, great, here, I'll set that hidden field to be customer ID. I'll set the panel title. I'm using the same here. You could do it a little differently, but then I can run my action and then everything happens at this level here. So let's go ahead and look at our customer list. So you'll notice in our customer list, I have a field in here called edit. And when I click that edit, you'll notice I'm doing something. First, I'm grabbing the customer ID from the current row's customer ID, and I'm grabbing the company name as the pane title from the current list. So basically what I'm doing is saying, hey, when you click on this button, grab the customer ID and the company name and put those into a couple variables. And then let's call that function called load customer with that information. Now, the cool thing about this is that if I go to my JavaScript functions, there's nothing in here. This is my old one. These actually don't do anything. There's no, that load customer doesn't exist here because it actually exists here. So the behavior is the button, or when I click that button here, it grabs the customer ID and the pane title basically from the information on the current row and then calls that parent there. And then that then gets serviced by the main level, which says, okay, hey, thank you for the customer ID and the pane title or panel title. I'm going to set these items up here. And then what I'm going to do is, oh, I should probably go like this. This is probably a function problem here. Panel title. I actually want to pass in the customer name there. And then it runs this. And what this does is it looks at these hidden fields and off to the races there. Now, it's possible you could probably get rid of the hidden fields and use arguments. There's a couple other tricks you can use to kind of not have to do it, but I like it because I can use it from a debugging standpoint. So let me go ahead and show you one more time how that works. So you'll see initially my list does not exist here. I've got my hidden fields. I'm actually showing them here called record ID and panel tile. So when I click customer list, it grabs that customer list UX and opens it up in a tab pane right here. And everything is normal. Now remember when I said you have a button here, what's going to do there is when I click that button, it's going to grab this customer ID and company name, and then it's going to call the function at this top level to set these values and trigger the opening of that field. So watch when I click here, watch over here what happens to record ID and panel title. So I click there, you'll see that in a moment, it sets that value of the customer ID and the pane title, and then it triggers that action JavaScript that uses that information to set the alias and set the name of the tab using this data here. So essentially, the JavaScript and everything there doesn't know anything about the list below it. It's just saying, oh, whenever I get this function called, this JavaScript function, I'm going to go over here and look at this information. I'm going to set that information and then I'm going to trigger that action. So if I click here, watch what happens. You'll see that this list sent the message up to the top level with Anton and the name of it. And then it opened up this new tab with that information by pointing to the arguments. And so that's how you can fake essentially. And the nice thing now is I could use this template with other things. The trick is you kind of have to know what's going on. So if I had like maybe a list of companies and I had a company list, well, I most likely would create another function that would say, oh, okay, I've got a company ID and a company name, and then I want to have a action JavaScript to open that into a tab control here. So it's a little bit more advanced. It's kind of easier just to set it up with the list already in there. But you may have a situation where you have a fairly complex system where maybe you have 4 or 5 different lists that you want to present on the fly, but you still want to have this top level kind of behavior of being able to do it from within sort of a tabbed UI metaphor from there. So there were a lot of questions around this. Just send us an email. We'll send you this whole project. You can check it out. You can review the code. You can look at the pieces, understand what they're doing there. But that's how you can essentially mimic that same functionality with the tabbed UI using just panel cards, panel list. The trick here is, again, we have to create a little JavaScript function that you pass in some information and then take an action. In my case, I set 2 hidden fields, then I launch this here. So by the way, this works with anything else. Like you could create another function in here to display a message. So let's say, let's try that. I want to just show you to extend the concept of what goes on here. So let's say at our top level, you want to be able to show messages. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to JavaScript actions. I'm going to create a new action here. It's going to call message show. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to define that. And I'm going to use the transient message methodology. Hello. And let's say we'll go top here. Okay. So now we've got our message show. So I'm going to copy this to the clipboard here. So I'm going to create a JavaScript function here. And I'll explain why I have to create a function here. Show message function. And I'm going to go ahead and just put in my action JavaScript. Oops, let me clean that up a little bit. Okay, so first you might be going, well, you've created the action JavaScript. Why can't I just run this little piece of code here? Well, the problem is if let's say I'm in my customer list here and I run that piece of code, well, this assumes that you're in the same control. So it's going to look in here for a JavaScript action called that. Problem is it doesn't exist. It's at the parent level. So I'm going to go ahead and create a panel header. And I'm going to create a button in here. Let's go to other controls and create a button. I'll go show message. And in my show message right here, I'm just going to go, let's see, what did I call that? Hold on here. What did I call that? I called that show message function. In my show message, I'm going to call that JavaScript. Okay. So now the important thing about that is when I call that function here on my child record or child UX, what it's going to do is it's first going to look here and it's going to say, oh, I don't see that function. So then it says, well, I'm going to go ahead and pass that to my parent, passes to my parent and says, oh, here's show message function. So I know that will break. Let me go fix that. It should actually be, and that's where you have to be a little careful. That's why everything at the same level is a lot easier, a little fewer things to break here. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this and give this a run. So hold on here. Okay, so let me open my customer list. I've now edited my customer list to have a little button on it with a header. Now I'm going to click show message and check it out. Now notice this action right here is coming from this UX, not from this UX. So that gives you a lot of power because you can create a whole series of things you need to do at the top level, and then you can call them from any UX that's opened up inside that panel, and it basically just passes that information to the top level. And if you need to, you notice this is kind of hard-coded to hello. So let's go ahead and go into, I'm going to go back to my JavaScript actions. I'm going to, let's see, edit that action. I'm going to go to text mode because I want to see what it looks like. You can see it's pretty extensive here. And so I probably, well, I can try it. Basically, I can grab all this information, copy that. We'll see if this breaks. Then instead of running that there, I'm going to run it right here. And I'm going to do something. I'm going to go message. And then I'm going to go plus message plus. Okay. So what I've done now is instead of having a hard-coded message in here, I've grabbed the JavaScript that's going to create that transient message. I now pass in some text, and then I'm using that text in here to build the message. So if I haven't screwed it up, I can go now over to my customer list, go into this button right here and give it a message. Hello, webinar team. And what it'll do is this function will pass that in, and then at the top level, it should give that message in there. So that way you can kind of pass directives. You can have generic functions at the top level, showing messages, refreshing control bars, Like for instance, you could refresh control bar information, etc. You really, sky's the limit. You just kind of have to manage now the message passing from the child to the parent. So notice now it's showing me my message, because when I click this button, I not only tell it to run that function, but I give it some information. And then that function says, oh, thank you for that message. I will now build the command to do that from there. But it's using the same concept where when I click show message, it's looking for that function at the UX level. And since that UX doesn't have that function, it passes it to the parent, and the parent does that before. So I'm going to break at this point. I'm sure there's some questions about that. But again, it's kind of a cool workaround for obviously doing the ability to open up, UXs mimic the tabbed UI, but you can use this for many other different methods. If you have embedded objects, you can just pass messages around using JavaScript within the system. Pretty handy and pretty fun. And you'll find there are some certain situations when you start segmenting your app into separate modules, you're going to want to use embedded and you're going to want to use dynamic loading. Then what will happen is you'll start coming across, well, I need to talk between stuff. Well, how do I do that? An effective way is through this methodology here.
Fantastic. Okay, so first
a little
question.
More complicated.
In your example, you clicked on something to show details about a customer. Could you do it with suppliers or something else like that for that same record?
Yes. Okay. So in how that method, let's go ahead and demonstrate that. Hold on 1 second. I just want to adjust my audio. I'm starting to lose it, so bear with one.
Okay. Dan's starting to lose it, apparently. That's terrible.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Sarah.
There was one thing I wanted to mention, and it was asked in the questions. And since Dion is busy doing something, I wanted to just mention to everybody that.
Go ahead, please.
I just want to mention that, unfortunately, the recording for our last webinar on April 29th did not succeed. It failed, so we don't have a recording for that webinar for people looking for it.
Not
and
our fault.
it's unfortunate.
Oh.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
But I just wanted to mention that. Oh, you'd have to take it up with GoToMeeting on that one.
I might have to go back and figure out what I did and re-record it. I think I can re-record it, and then we can at least do things there. That was a fun one.
That would be great. Okay. Actually, a couple people had asked.
Okay. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to delete this. Basically, what I'm doing is just making a copy of this, and I will go ahead and put in a little piece of text, and I'll say, this would show vendor stuff. Okay. So, oh no, I don't want that. Nope, I screwed that up. I don't want that one. That's my list. That's the good one there. Okay, what I want is, let's see, it's duplicate this one. So now let's say this is the vendor edit. So I'm just going to go ahead and go vendor edit. Okay. So in there, instead of I'm mocking up because I don't have the data set up, but this would be showing vendor editing instead of a customer. So it would be actually bound to like a different table or something like that. So let me go ahead and put that there. Okay, so I've got my second UX. I've got two UXs in my system that are driven by arguments. The first one is the customer edit argument, and then we have our vendor edit argument. So now what we want to do is first, let's go to the top level to our main UX. So what I'm going to do here is first thing I'm going to do is I need to create my UX loader. So I want to create the action JavaScript that will load up that vendor information. So what's nice is since I have this one already, I can just say duplicate it. So there we're going to go duplicate that one, and I'm going to call that vendor edit UX load. Now I'm going to go into that and notice it's a UX component. Well, first thing I'm going to do is change my customer edit. I'm going to go from there. I'm going to pick my other vendor UX. And in my case, you would probably have a vendor ID and a customer ID, etc. So you would change that. Now, the important thing is that remember, when this targets, I'm going to use JavaScript here to basically create the alias and also create the header. So let's go ahead and I'm going to call this panel title for vendor. And for the alias, I'm going to use, we'll call this, actually it's JavaScript. Let's see how it's JavaScript underscore JavaScript underscore alias underscore vendor. Okay, so now when this runs, it's going to do a couple things. First, it's going to open up a vendor. It's going to run this little piece of JavaScript to create the alias. And then I'm also going to use this piece of JavaScript to create my panel title. So the way I did this is that to make all this kind of work, I'm going to create two new text boxes. I'm going to go vendor ID and panel title vendor. Or actually, let's make that vendor panel title. So kind of have to have a way to tell, this UX when it loads up what to use from this here. So if we actually go into this vendor here, when I load the argument, I don't want to use my customer ID. I want to use that new vendor ID. Okay, so now when this runs, basically it's going to look at this field right here to get what ID to pass into the vendor UX. And then it's going to look for two JavaScript functions here. So we'll go ahead and copy these and we'll change those. As you can see, there's a little bit more work. Oh, that didn't copy them properly to get this set up, but let's go here and we'll go here. And is it alias vendor or vendor alias? Let me check that. I'll just go fix them real quick. Okay, and then we'll go vendor panel title and vendor ID. So we got to, kind of cover the fact that, we have to dynamically set those pieces up here. So this will set the title of the tab that gets opened up. And let's make sure we call it vendor panel title. And then also for alias, we're going to look at vendor ID. Let's look at the controls and we have vendor ID there. So now the last thing we need to do is we need to create a JavaScript function that is essentially the same thing as this. Basically, we're going to say function, we'll call this function load vendor. And we're going to pass in the vendor ID and the vendor panel title. Okay, so now we want to do is put that here, vendor ID and vendor panel title. But I also need to make sure I'm setting the value of, for instance, the vendor ID and the value of those hidden fields. So this function, and then what we need to do is run the vendor action. So I can actually go here, that action we used to run there, I can create this, copy this and go right here. Cool. Okay, so first what it did is I created my JavaScript action that basically opens a UX to edit it, that vendor UX. It's going to look at those hidden fields to find out which ID. Also, when I specified this, I told it to create the alias based on the alias vendor and the panel title vendor. And so what that does, make sure that's correct. Let me see here. Yeah, JavaScript panel title vendor. What that does is it runs these two functions right here to set the value of those hidden fields, or I'm sorry, to get the values of those hidden fields. And now the last thing I need to do is I go into my customer list, go into my list of customers. Here you go, my field. I'm going to add a new field here, a static image field. I'll call that edit vendor. And I'm going to change the image to make it look a little differently. Let's say a vendor. Let's go to SVG and just grab something a little unique here. Okay. Just something bold. And now what I'm going to do is this, is that what's nice is I can go to my existing field right here, my edit field, look at my on-click event. Let's just copy that. Go to the new, the edit vendor, and paste it there. And again, I would normally get, I'd have vendor list, but I'm going to say vendor ID. I'm going to actually, so I would call this thing, vendor ID, vendor panel title. And I'm going to pass that in here to vendor ID and vendor, panel title. And last, but we want to load vendor, not there. So what we're doing here is for this particular UX, we're grabbing that information, basically what row was selected, its ID of that row and its panel title. Then we're doing loading the vendor. In that case, I'm calling now that new function I created on the parent, they'll do there. Now, the chance of this working right off the gate, well, we'll see in a moment. Let's save this. And now we know the way to go. So again, I'm using those little hidden fields in here, so it'll allow us to double check. That's kind of why I like it here. So I'm going to open up my customer list. So notice I have my two fields here, vendor ID and vendor panel title. So when I click the, I know what I have to do. I have to actually go in here and add the edit for vendor there. That's the part I missed. Now I know this seems like a fair amount of work. Once you kind of know the structure of it, it's, you can put it together. The beauty of it is now everything's kind of segmented into smaller pieces. So if I go edit my vendor list, I can do that. So notice I have now my edit vendor column right here. When I click there, what it should do is call the function at the top level, fill out these fields, and then trigger the opening of the item there. So you notice it did get vendor and vendor panel title, and something didn't work in there. So let's go back and double check a couple things. So it's called load vendor. Let's make sure I did that right. Let's see, fields. I think that's correct because it load vendor. We got the right data, vendor ID, vendor panel title. And then I'll show you one other technique to debug the kind of JavaScript that goes on there. So let's go, and then we're running the vendor edit load. So this part is working. So you notice that we did set the fields here. So this part is working. My guess is these, let's see, vendor alias. Let's go look at now the action JavaScript. Go in here. Okay, so that's called alias vendor. There's the problem right there. Notice I called this alias vendor, not vendor alias. So it's why we don't like code is then vendor panel title. Let's go ahead and just double check that to make sure. Panel title vendor. So I just had misspellings on, what was it called? Jeez. Best thing to do is copy it. There we go. Now, I'm going to go break that again. If this works, I'll go break it and show you how you can also look and see where the error is occurring, just so you'll have that. So let's go ahead and open this up. And now I'm going to add the vendor on there. You notice this gets set and something's still up. It's not calling. So let's go ahead and open up our Chrome debugger. And I click this button down here called Chrome debugger. Go to console. Alias vendor is not defined. So I'm still got a naming convention problem. So that's called alias vendor. Let's go to our JavaScript events. Did I not spell that? Alias let's see. So this should be JavaScript underscore alias underscore vendor. Okay. Yeah, that's right. alias_vendor. And I am triggering vendor edit load. Let's try it one more time. Notice my Chrome debugger is still open so we can keep an eye on stuff. So no errors at this point. Open my customer list. And then we'll go ahead and open that. My guess is we still have a problem. Yep. So alias vendor is not defined. Well, I'm not going to spend much more time. I don't want to waste, we have probably other questions, but let's see if it's somewhere. Let's make sure all those are right. Vendor title. And then one double check here. So it's the problem is here, JavaScript alias_vendor. And if I go to my JavaScript code, function, yeah, interesting. I'm not sure why that's giving an error because this, it is called alias_vendor, like this alias. See anywhere else? Anybody else see anything? No. I'll have to go in and check and find out what's going on that.
That's the kind of problem you tend to find 35 seconds after the webinar ends.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah. Let's see. I'm just curious, real quick, see if I open up this and then does it open that up okay? Yeah. See, that worked. That worked okay. But there's something I'm missing and just not seeing it. Again, why we like low code because little spelling things here. Alias_vendor. Well, let's go ahead and while I'm see what other questions we have. I'm sorry but that's the basic concept is you have to do a couple things. One is you create a different function at the top level. You create a different action JavaScript at the top level, and then you tie it together essentially the same. So it becomes somewhat of a copy paste exercise. As you can see, it's maybe a little prone to things, but so.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so the question was, when you had that list of customers and you tapped on a particular customer, it opened up a tab for that customer. The question is, if you tapped on that same customer again, is it just going to open up another tab? And if so, could you prevent it from doing that? Could you make it smart?
No, and that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So if I go back here to show you what happens is that, and actually I can demonstrate this real quickly. Mm-hmm. The alias is what dictates whether something gets opened or not. So, and this is kind of what we covered last week which, sorry, I can't tell you, go look at that. So when I click here, what I'm doing is saying, okay, open up a UX with this panel title and this name alias. So when it opens up this little tab pane right here, the tab pane name is Alfred's, but the name of this alias for this thing is called Alfkey because I'm using that there. So if, you know what, I wonder. Yeah, it's still there. So if I come here and I open up another one, when I open this one, it says, oh, that's a new alias. So since we have a new alias, I'm going to open up a new tab pane. Now, if I go back and click on here, you'll notice something. Notice what it did. It said, I already have that alias. That alias exists. So I'm going to just go ahead and take you there versus spawning and opening up a whole new one. So now if you did want to, and we kind of talked about this last week, if you did want to be able to open up this same record multiple times, then in your JavaScript, you essentially have to append like the time or the number of seconds so that each alias is unique. Because since I'm re-clicking here, it's saying, oh, it's the same alias. But if I had a little code in there in my alias generator that say appended the number of seconds of the day, then it would say, oh, that's a new alias. So it actually open up this same record, but with a new alias. And therefore you could have multiple of those records open. We don't care, you can have as many as you want, but the system will look at that alias as that determiner of whether it opens it or not.
Excellent, thanks. All right, now on to a more basic, just list control question. And the question is basically, this person has got a list control, and they wanted to be able to fit more stuff on the screen, so they made the font size of the list control smaller, but the row size stayed exactly the same size. So all they gained was smaller font size. I want to know, how do you make the row size also smaller?
Okay. That's a good question.
You don't have a lot of blank space. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay. So basically, the sizing of the list is determined by the style. So to modify the style, you need to modify the style to be able to show a different item. So, and you would do that normally if you're going to have this across all of your application. You go to the web style builder, and then you can modify it there. And that would allow you to modify it there. I believe you can go into here, go to the field properties here. This height and width is for the overall list, so it's not on a per row basis kind of scenario. Right. If we come down here to the layout, this is where we determine whether it's a column, a Kanban, Freeform, custom, etc. So in here, you can see you can override the class name for these items. So I'm going to go ahead and do here, and I'm just going to play with it. Like, so, okay, let's take an example. Let's look at what this looks like real quick. And I'm kind of guessing right now, but let's see. So it's this here. Let's go in there. Let's go to style.
Now with the list, you have the choice between the columnar layout, which I believe is the one that you selected, but you can also do a freeform layout. And in a freeform layout, I suspect you would have a great deal more control because you're actually setting up the HTML that goes from.
Yeah, you could create your own table structure in there for sure. Freeform is primarily used for non-grid. It's really meant more for like mobile, but you're right, absolutely, that could go on there. So let's see, let's just give this a try. List item, inline style, let's say, let's go, I'm just gonna guess here, let's see, is there a height? I forget, there's a height. Let's try as 40 pixels. I'm just guessing here. And let's go ahead and save that and give that a working preview, and let's see what happens. Probably doesn't look good, but you never know. There we go. Now, so if you want to make your list smaller, so you can see now my list item is 40 pixels high. And again, where I got that, lucky guess on my part, just to let everybody know, as if you couldn't guess that already, was in the list inline style. So basically we override the style of that list. So in this case, let's say we want to minimize. Let's try that. What's the font on this? I forget where you set the font. Well, we can actually go here, and I think we can actually go in here and say the font family. Let's give this a try. Make it kind of interesting. Huh? No, not wingdings.
A little too interesting. Yeah.
There we go. Let's do this one. That looks interesting.
All right.
Did I not select that one?
I
didn't. You have to hit the plus button.
I got to hit plus.
Yeah. Oh, it's up a little bit farther. I want to get that one. Okay, cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to font size it to be, is it points? And let's make it, let's say 8. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at what we've done, how we've broken it. This is again where you want to use Git to check things in and out. Okay, yeah. So I've got a nice tight representation. Actually, it's even smaller than my icons. Now what I can go back in here, go into my list properties, go down to my style. And let's go ahead and go down to here and make that say 10 pixels. I think that's going to be too small, so let's make it 12. So this is kind of a trial and error process to get exactly what you want. You'd want to try it on a couple different monitors, see if it's even visible. But now we should see a much tighter representation. Pretty tight. Not bad, huh? So you can see I've almost doubled the amount of stuff I can see on the screen by just tightening it up a little bit there. Everything else works the same. So again, where I found that was in list customers, went to list properties, down to the layout properties and set here. Now, again, that's limited to this list. So you may want to go to the list, the web style builder, and make that there. So every list within it, but if not, you just copy this, go into your other list, paste it, and you're done. Up to you on how you want to do that.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Okay, so here's a question about chunking. I know we covered this maybe 3 months ago or so, and I don't know that you'll have the answer to this question, but I was hoping that you could do a little bit of a discussion on chunking. The question is, the chunking feature works well in Chrome, but for some reason it's not working in IE, and there's no intermediate response, only the final response.
Yeah.
It's probably a setting somewhere in IE, hoping someone already knows the answer to this. I don't know if we do know the answer offhand. But I know at least a couple of people brought up questions about chunking, and I wish if you could tell us a little bit about that feature. I know it's new to Alpha.
Yeah, let me go ahead and let me see if I think I have that in here already, a demonstration.
Cool. So the short version, if I'm correct here, is that chunking is a way of letting you do an AJAX callback to get some information back. But if you're getting a lot of information back, or if it's going to take a long time for that request to complete, you want to be able to give the user some indication that something's going on. And that's where you can do chunk responses by showing them, hey, I'm at 20%, or hey, I've got this many records, and so on. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Oh, and it says Dave is so cool. Of course I wanted you to show this one.
Yeah. Let's see. See if that did. I think this is one where I think it's the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I think I have to wait. I'm being a little too impatient.
So again, for the person who sent the question about IE, could you send that over to guides@alphasoftware.com so that we can put our development team on it and see if they have the answer for you?
So the heart of what chunk responses are is the following, is that normally when you have a XBasic callback, basically you run the code and then you can send back a message saying, hey, I'm done. Now, the chunked response capability allows you to do the following, is instead of waiting till a long process is done and then emitting that at the end, where the user's like, I don't know what's going on, you may want to update the user, like, I'm updating these records here, I'm doing these records here, etc. So maybe it's a 5 or 10 second long process, well, every second or so, because people are very impatient. If they see the thing just sitting there, they think something's broken or hung up. So the way chunk response does is that built into it is a function called A5 chunks response write. And basically what this will do is send a message to the front end, and essentially during this process, you can send messages. And you'll notice that the message I'm sending is some action JavaScript or some command that's going to be run. It's JavaScript that's going to be run on the client from that standpoint there. So the idea behind this is that when this function runs, when it sees this, it pauses, calls back to the actual client out in the field and gives it this action or this JavaScript, whatever, an alert message, an update, or anything like that. Then you notice for this demo, I'm just sleeping for 2 seconds, and then I'm sending another response after that in there. So if you have a long process, you can say, okay, after step 1, I want to send the message to the person to update them. And this can be, and the cool thing about this is this can be any kind of JavaScript. So it could be native JavaScript, it could be Bootstrap JavaScript. It could also be, in our case, Alpha's action JavaScript to do things like setting a value or updating a field or showing and hiding things on the front end. Now, the important thing about this is that when I do, that's the standard callback. Very important is when I do an action callback, let me go here. You have to enable this allowed chunk responses. If you don't do that, then it doesn't set things up properly. So normally this is unchecked. And so you just say, okay, this is the function I'm calling. Then when that function's done, it's going to send some information back. But if you enable this, then you can say, this basically enables the Alpha to handle that kind of messaging from there. Now, we're going to cover this, I'm hoping next week. This is cool. I mean, this has a lot of really neat features in terms of it. It's basically depending upon setting up a communication between the front and the back end. But there's another way you can go. There's a newer capability that's been added called Pusher. And let me go ahead and open this up here. And you may have heard of it, and we'll cover this again so you'll see. And it may be a more reliable way to do. I find chunking is kind of good, but it's just not necessarily the end all be all. It was kind of like a nice aspect there. So let's go to pusher.com. And we'll go here. So Alpha, there's another technology called WebSockets. And what WebSockets is basically when you set up a UX out in the field, you can set up a WebSocket. So the server can at any time call that client and say, hey, guess what? I've got something for you to do. Now, WebSockets are built into Alpha. They're built into our app server. But what we were finding is when we moved over to IIS and other more complicated environments like Alpha Cloud, WebSockets don't work as well. There's just some structural architectural things in there. So recently, the development team included support for what's called Pusher. And what Pusher is basically a notification system. How it works is that, let's say I serve up a web page to someone. So let's say I have a dashboard and I send that dashboard to someone. Someone says, okay, I want this dashboard. When that dashboard loads, it registers itself with Pusher, which is a third-party service. Now, that service then knows about that client. Now what I can do is in the Alpha server, I can send a message to that service. That service says, oh, here are all the clients that are waiting for that message, and send that message out. So we can actually, instead of using chunked responses, we can, during my XBasic script, I can call the Pusher service and say, hey, send this message out. I'm halfway through. So there's things to it. But there's other things, like for instance, let's say I had a dashboard system. And I don't want that dashboard system to be having all these clients calling back every 5 seconds saying, has anything changed? Should I update my charts? Instead, what I want to do is have the server say, oh, something's changed. Anybody who has this shown, please update it. Now, the cool thing about the Pusher is that you're allowed up to $1 million a day for like $49 a month. So it's insanely cheap in terms of what you're doing. I mean, if anybody's doing 1 million messages per day, this is really meant for doing like messaging apps and things like that, which is really, really powerful. There is free versions for you to try and be able to do it. So for developers, you can try with a sample account, you have a certain amount. So it's really a good system. And what's really nice is that it opens up a lot of other things you can do with the Pusher notifications that are not even WebSockets and things like that. So I'm going to do a demo of that because it's really pretty cool stuff and could be an alternative to chunk messages. But more importantly, for anybody who's using WebSockets, it's a really nice feature to be able to do it. And Alpha's already built in all of the commands, all the functions, everything else. So it's pretty easy to set up and enable and get things done. Plus, it allows you to integrate with other services and other things like that. So it's pretty handy there. So we'll go over that next time. But to wrap up on this real quick, again, chunked responses are when you do a XBasic callback, you enable chunked responses. When you've done that, then what you're able to do is that in your function, you can call this little command, which will then send a message back to the client while this XBasic is running, meaning you don't have to run everything to send a message back. You can sort of send those interim messages. And as the person noted, works really well on Chrome. IE is kind of really Edge. We should have a much better experience with Edge because it's basically built on the same Chrome engine. So we're seeing a lot better commonality on that. IE is one of those things where it's IE and only, there's a lot of things that still aren't fully compatible. And that's why most people have gone to Chrome. And I know there are organizations that are IE specific, but they're rapidly starting to migrate over to Edge because Edge has a better engine, is more embracing the industry. It's just sort of Microsoft's new philosophy to say, let's play nicely with other people, and try and outcompete them on features, functionality, and capability, but not play the game of, oh, it doesn't work on us, so you have to write your system for us. So there's some neat stuff going on, and I think Edge is going to make everybody's life a lot easier in the future.
Fantastic. Well, we've run out of time, not necessarily out of questions. So if you do have more questions, please send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Thank you very much, Dion, for presenting. Thanks for everyone showing up. Oh, and of course, thank you, Sarah, for being online and answering questions as well. Hope to see you next week at our next Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Take care and goodbye.